This is the motion proposed approval by Dail Eireann on the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund Regulation 2022. Minister, you have 10 minutes and I call on you to move the motion.
Yeah, I so move.
Thank you, Minister.
Okay, thank you. And an important pillar of government policy is to ensure that the horse and greyhound racing industries achieve maximum potential and in doing so contribute to economic and social development over a wide geographic distribution across the country. The horse and greyhound racing industries make a valuable contribution to a balanced regional economy. It's estimated that the thoroughbred industry has an annual economic impact of €1.84 billion with direct and indirect employment of 29,000 people, and the greyhound sector benefits an estimated 10,000 people. The thoroughbred industry in particular brings a high level of international investment into the country. Government funding, in addition to supporting these key industries, presents an excellent opportunity to yield a high return for its investment, leading to a flow of income right through the economy, thereby providing widespread benefits to society. And support for certain strategic industries is important for future economic growth and provides widespread benefits for society as well as the economy too. Successive governments have acknowledged the importance of these industries and have supported them through legislation and through consistent policy initiatives. The support provided by public funds through investment in these industries has enabled Ireland to develop a world-class reputation for excellence in horse racing, greyhound racing and in breeding. The horse and greyhound racing industries receive financial support from the state through the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund under Section 12 of the Horse and Greyhound Racing Act of 2001. Payments from the fund to HRI or Horse Racing Ireland and also go to Rasia Con Éireann or RCE. In the period from 2001 to now, a total of €1.54 billion has been paid from the fund to the horse and greyhound racing industries in accordance with the provisions of the Act, and the cumulative upper limit on payments from the fund provided for under the relevant regulations has been reached. Exchequer support provided from the fund is crucial to the continued development of the horse and greyhound racing industries. In order to give effect to the budgets or to the provisions of this year's budget for 2023, this cumulative upper limit must be increased by regulation, and that's why we are here today. The estimates for the department passed by both houses of the Oireachtas as part of the budget include an allocation of €91 million from the Horse and Greyhound Racing or to the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund, and this will be distributed in accordance with the provisions of the Act, which means 80% going to HRI to the tune of €72.8 million and 20% to RCE at 18, accounting for €18.2 million. In order to allow the department to provide the monies allocated in the budget, it is necessary to comply with the technical requirement under the Act to increase the cumulative limit on the amount payable from the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund by €91 million to some €1.64 billion. This is achieved by way of the regulation submitted to the House today, and the aggregate limit on the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund has been increased in this way in 2004 and also from 2009 to last year. In relation to the horse racing industry, the 2017 Deloitte report into the economic impact of Irish racing and breeding, commissioned by HRI, indicates that the total economic impact and stimulated direct expenditure of the Irish breeding and racing industry is estimated at €1.84 billion based on 2016 figures. In addition, it was estimated that the industry supports direct and indirect employment of 29,000 people. Horse racing generates a very significant return to the rural economy and a positive international profile for the country as well. Of course, behind all of the facts and figures are very much the thousands of men and women who directly and indirectly make our racing industry what it is and what it has been built up to be. As proven in 2022, over to date, Irish owners, trainers, jockeys and horses are setting standards globally, as has been the case in all years, and their stellar achievements and enduring influence underscore our country's international prominence in the industry. We're the second largest producer of bloodstock in the world by value sold, after the USA, and we're also the third highest, or have the third highest number of thoroughbreds foaled each year, coming after the USA and Australia. Statistics released by Horse Racing Ireland for horse racing and breeding in the country for the first 6 months of this year point to a continued resilience in the industry. While some of the metrics are down year on year, many figures compare favourably to the first 6 months of 2019, which is the last full comparable year we have pre the COVID pandemic. The importance of a strong welfare and integrity foundation is crucial, and this is well recognised throughout the industry. We continue to work with HRI, the Horse Racing Regulatory Board, or IHRB for short, and other relevant stakeholders to ensure the highest standards of integrity and welfare are maintained. In that regard, in November of last year, the Joint Oireachtas Committee on Agriculture, Food and the Marine published a report on horse racing in Ireland, and at the committee's request, an international equine anti-doping expert, Dr. Craig Swan, was commissioned to conduct an independent review of the IHRB's equine anti-doping programme. This review concluded that the programme does at least match international best practice in most respects and has made significant advances in recent years. Nevertheless, further improvements are always possible. HRI has informed the Department that it spent some €5.4 million on a suite of equine initiatives last year and has indicated a €5.8 million equine or welfare spend for this year. These initiatives include support for animal welfare bodies to identify new careers for horses when they exit racing, infrastructural improvements at racecourses to mitigate risk to horses, and support as well for the Irish Equine Centre. In relation to the greyhound racing industry at Cairns, according to the 2021 Power Report, the industry provides and supports considerable employment both directly and indirectly. It is estimated that in 2019 the industry supported over 4,000 full-time and part-time jobs in the economy. In addition, there are over 6,000 active greyhound owners, so the total number of people, according to the report, deriving economic benefit from the sector was estimated at over 10,000. The funding provided to the greyhound racing sector helps sustain a long-standing tradition, as the industry is very much part of the social fabric of our country. This funding underpins economic activity across the country and is of particular importance in rural Ireland too. The future of the industry is dependent very much on a strong governance platform and on the industry having very high standards of integrity and welfare founded on a strong regulatory system. And there is a strong commitment to improved animal welfare in the sector in the programme for government, and future funding of the sector is very much contingent on welfare standards being upheld, and this is reflected in the work of my officials in their liaisons and engagement with Rasia Con Éireann. Provisions in the Greyhound Racing Act of 2019, which came into effect on the 28th of May 2019, will make a real difference in this regard. That legislation strengthens the legal basis for the industry with a view to fortifying the integrity of the greyhound racing sector and also of improving provision in relation to greyhound traceability. The new Act improves the governance of Rasia Con Éireann, it strengthens its regulatory controls and also modernises sanctions and improves integrity within the sector. And it provides the industry with the real tools needed to effect fundamental change and reform. It facilitates the Board Cairns in focusing on its priority objective of achieving the highest standards of care and welfare of greyhounds. Further commencement orders for the small number of remaining sections will continue to be phased in as expediently as possible, ensuring the important heritage associated with greyhound racing in the country can continue under the appropriate rules and regulations. A key element of the new legislation is the provision for the first time of a full IT traceability system with Rasia Con Éireann, which they put into operation on the 11th of January last year. That system provides a mechanism to ensure that racing greyhounds are properly registered and traceable throughout their lives. And data from the system at the end of September of this year indicated that 32,474 greyhounds were subject to traceability. It is intended that this system's phase 2, or resets phase 2, will be developed further next year, and this will include additional functionality to facilitate the recording of injuries at RCE licensed stadia during racing official and unofficial trials, and also the capture of medical details and the recording of sampling history, and also any adverse analytical findings and report details of these offences too. In addition to its care and welfare programme, Rasia Con Éireann undertakes a comprehensive range of activities in the areas of regulatory, integrity and laboratory functions, and this includes welfare inspections and investigations, also testing regimes, veterinary services, for example, too, and financial support as well for the Irish Retired Greyhound Trust, and contributions to private rehoming agencies. So in conclusion, at Cairns, given the wide geographic distribution of both these two industries, they are fundamental to the achievement and continuation of a balanced regional economic growth situation. Nurturing rural economies is obviously, and as people will know, a key priority for the Government, very much reflected in the investment that we have undertaken and the initiatives that we're pursuing. And these industries as well should be given the recognition for the considerable contribution that they make to rural activity and rural employment in particular. The welfare of horses and greyhounds Cairns is a cornerstone of both industries, and I'm assured by HRI and Rasia Con Éireann that they're striving to ensure the highest standards for the sports and its participants on and away from the racecourse. The Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund has played a key role in providing the investment needed and has been instrumental in shaping the destiny of both these industries. And accordingly, I am seeking support of the House to ensure that Horse Racing Ireland and Rasia Con Éireann receive the funding provided for in Budget 2023 for the important role played and carried out by both industries and the economic activity that is supported by them. So I commend the regulation to the House and look forward to listening to the views and contributions of members, and of course following on from the very significant engagement we had at the Oireachtas Committee last week or the week before.
Thank you, Minister. So now we have Sinn Féin. Now we have two speakers. Deputy Carthy, you're actually taking 7 minutes now, if that's okay, and Deputy Browne, you're taking 3. Okay, so you're going to move. You have an amendment, Deputy.
Yeah, Garamaigat, and firstly, Cairns, if you'd indulge me I'd like to welcome members of the Blaney Blades, one of the great community organisations from County Monaghan who are visiting the Dáil today. Tá fáilte ra bhile go léir. I would move Amendment 2. Nobody disputes, or let me rephrase that, the vast majority of people accept that both horse racing and greyhound racing are important aspects of our rural communities and generate significant economic input within rural communities, many of whom do not have many other economic generators. Nobody, or again, very few people dispute the fact that the state is right to support both sectors financially, and certainly from a Sinn Féin perspective we support the principle of supporting the horse and greyhound racing sectors in order to ensure that they contribute to the greatest possible extent to rural communities, to our domestic economy, and that we can ensure and therefore insist on the highest aspects of integrity, transparency, accountability and, of course, animal welfare standards. What we're talking about here today is a proposal to deliver taxpayers' funds to the tune of €91 million to both of those sectors. We have no rationale, and none has ever been provided, as to the basis on which that figure is arrived at. It is a huge sum of money under any terms. What the Sinn Féin amendment requests is that the Minister will conduct a full review of all funding in respect of this fund, that it would analyse the social and economic impact of the fund, including the efficacy of the fund in supporting the development of both sectors, the broadest cohort of those involved in the sectors and rural communities. Whether or not the portion of the funds that are used, particularly by Horse Racing Ireland, to subsidise prize funds is the best value for money, and the efficacy of the fund in ensuring the highest levels of animal welfare standards. A similar motion and amendment was brought forward last year, and the Minister rejected it on the basis that this type of analysis is conducted all the time, I think was the term that he used. There's no evidence at all that such an analysis has ever been carried out by the department. And nobody has ever provided a rational basis as to why we have a fund that is now reaching €100 million per annum. It's €91 million, and it is divided 80% to 20% between Horse Racing Ireland and Rasia Con Éireann, regardless of the circumstances. It is the only, and we asked the Controller and Auditor General to look at this, it is the only aspect of state funding that we can find on which two Distinct and entirely separate organisations have their funding linked on a pro rata basis to this degree. And it makes absolutely no sense, because the Minister has told the committee last week that he looks at the business cases that are provided by the organisations, and then he decides what the horse and greyhound funding for the subsequent year should be. But it is impossible to accept, and it is, I would say, verging on the unbelievable to suggest that every single year 2 separate business cases are brought before the department, and every single year them cases make an appeal, and a worthy appeal, to get taxpayers' funds to the tune of tens of millions of euro based on an 80-20 split. It doesn't, and it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't stand up to scrutiny, and it certainly doesn't inspire confidence that this fund is subjected to the highest levels of accountability and transparency that we should expect in respect of funds. And the conditionality that is associated is incredibly limited. There are no results-based criteria under which this fund is dependent on. So either organisation can say that they're expending a portion of the fund towards animal welfare, but there is no basis on which we can actually assess whether or not that level of funding has actually made an impact in improving the reputation that has been tarnished by animal welfare issues that have been made public in recent years. We know, and it has been well versed, that there have been issues within the greyhound sector. I accept that many within the sector have gone to great lengths to address those issues. We know as well that there have been issues in respect of horse racing that has damaged the reputation, and again, any of those activities have been carried out by a minority. But the reputational damage and the need to address that isn't helped when the Minister cites an independent expert who carried out a review of the anti-doping measures, and he assessed in his report that Ireland meets the highest of international standards. That would be all well and good if that international expert had actually set foot on the island of Ireland while he was conducting that exercise. It was an entirely computer-based model, without attending any racetrack, without attending any stables, and without speaking to anybody directly involved in the sector on a farm. So there's concerns, Minister, that have been raised. This is taxpayers' money. It's a lot of money. So it's not good enough to say that because we support certain sectors, we support whatever sum of money that you and your department come out with, without any basis as to how you've reached that particular sum of money. You haven't explained how, from the sum of money that was allocated in 2017 to the sum of money that you're proposing today, it's an increase of €11 million. You have never set out precisely how you come to the figure that €11 million is needed in additional funding today as opposed to 4 years ago, what rationale that is based on, and how you come to the rationale that that should be distributed on a perfectly, once again, 80-20 base. I urge the Minister to accept our amendments in order to ensure that we have the highest standards of accountability and transparency for this public money, and so that we can restore public confidence in both sectors and ensure that both sectors and everybody involved actually benefits from this funding, as well as the communities in which they live.
And I commend Deputy Carthy for bringing the amendment, and hopefully the government will take it on board. The horse and greyhound industry play a significant role in my own county, Tipperary, whether it's the small operator with a couple of dogs or horses or the larger operators. The contribution they make to my home county cannot be understated and must be supported, Minister, to protect the huge employment in these sectors. And when we are asked to approve the expenditure to such an amount of people's money, we must be sure that there is full transparency, not just from the organisations that distribute it, but also from your department in terms of how that funds is delivered, is overseen and guaranteed to deliver the social, economic and welfare benefits it is supposed to. It is with these matters in mind that we have submitted the amendment that Deputy Carthy is prepared to. And I will speak on that shortly. But to hark back to last year when a similar amendment was rejected by you, Minister, I ask, why is he so opposed to it? And that is the purpose of making these contributions like we are doing today. Last year I questioned how effective the fund is in supporting the small operators in both these sectors. I pointed out to you that this was not just a point of view of my own, but one which was being expressed to me from those operating in the sectors. I expressed the perception that is out there that the money given through the fund does make its way to the small operator in the manner that many believe it should. The question stands. Take horse racing for a moment. Figures from last year show that the lion's share of the prize fund were shared among a small number of the owners and trainers who could not be described as anything else but elite. In the greyhound sector, there is discontent at how private tracks are more or less expected to make their own way in life, and that the level of engagement with them by GRI is minimal and the funding is piecemeal. And this, of course, affects the smaller operator who say that they don't see the benefits of substantial state funding. And I cannot go any further before discussing the importance of adequate oversight and transparency on the department side when deciding upon the fund without taking into welfare. Confidence in the sector hinges upon satisfaction with welfare standards in both horse racing and greyhound racing. The vast majority of those involved treat their animals with the highest level of welfare standards in mind. But is the Minister confident that the manner in which the fund is used is effective as possible in assisting this? Is he satisfied that the board is engaging with stakeholders to the extent those operators would deem adequate on greyhound rehoming, for example? When deciding upon the level of funding, what account did you take of the slow pace with which CCTV is installed in stables at racecourses? We need to ensure that the level of detail Minister applies to these matters and a range of others is as firm as the industry that the public in general demands. And my final point relates to the arbitrary way the fund is divided and the approach the department is taking in deciding that horse racing Ireland gets 72.8 million and greyhound racing Ireland 18.2 million. As I said, the 80-20 split seems arbitrary, and I question if the need of one sector versus the other is taken into account. We in Sinn Féin support the sectors, and we want the sectors and the public to have confidence. That is why we are proposing a full review of the exchequer funding to the fund with a view of examining its social and economic impact and its effectiveness in supporting the development of both sectors and the rural communities they contribute to. We are also proposing this be done to examine whether the use of the fund, the subsidised prize funds, represent best value for money and its effectiveness in ensuring the highest levels of animal welfare. This can be done by you, Minister, reporting to the Dáil within 6 months of these allegations being adopted. And I asked earlier, Minister, if the Minister rejects our amendments, can he tell us why he is so opposed to it?
Now I'm going to look for the Labour Party, and Deputy Kelly, you're taking it. You have 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I'd like to move the Labour Party amendment.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Chair. Traditionally, the Labour Party has supported this fund, but as the years go on, Minister, we do need to look at it and how it's functioning. It is out of place with how the budgetary process works. It was put in at a certain time. The formula by which the calculations are made are locked from that time. And certainly, I think this year of all years, you really need to look at it before it comes through a budgetary cycle next year. I'm on the PAC as well as Deputy Carthy, and we don't know of any other formula that is used in this way. So while supporting funding for both industries, and I come from Tipperary, literally a few fields away from where Tiger Roll was bred, it's a huge county, probably the biggest county in Ireland when it comes to both horse racing and greyhound racing. While supporting the funding, we do need to look at the formula by which this is achieved. It's absolutely needed. We also need to look at the overall prospect of how this fund operates vis-à-vis other funding when it comes to other parts of government, i.e. sports capital and other forms of funding that's given out to sport and organisations in general. Because there does seem to be a mix and match approach rather than an actual holistic approach, and that really needs to be looked at in totality. To see is there fairness, to see is there fairness in relation to how distribution is being performed. Furthermore, in relation to the fund, if we look at how the fund is administered by both relevant organisations, we see that on the greyhound side of things, a lot of the funding is actually going into the administration rather than prizes, while the opposite is the case in relation to the HRI and funding. We also need to see that more of the actual fund and prizes in particular need to drift towards actually a fair distribution, particularly when it comes to horse racing, that there are formulas put in place to ensure that the smaller providers, smaller breeders, smaller trainers and owners are getting a fair crack of the whip. And I can speak very locally about that, because where I come there are an awful lot of smaller breeders and trainers, and they would raise this with me quite a bit. Obviously, when it comes to animal welfare, we need, whatever formula is used into the future and whatever process is used, we need to have ring-fence funding when it comes to welfare. We also, Minister, and I ask you to specifically look at this, when it comes to the Greyhound board, that there is somebody put on that board with a specific interest in this area that will increase the fund in particular, and will increase the percentage of their funding that's used for welfare in particular, and look at that. I think that would be a good recommendation, and I think most people in the House would support it. In relation to our amendment, we're asking that we look now at this stage, after all of these years, to see how this fund can be used it's obviously a huge economic benefit to rural areas and rural counties, and also urban areas, but how that can be more fairly distributed. Furthermore, we need to, as I've said, look at how it can ensure higher standards in animal welfare, and something that's often forgotten about. In fact, I think I'm the only person who keeps raising this year in, year out. We need a sectoral order in relation to employment rights, particularly when it comes to horse racing. There are thousands of people employed. I am concerned, among some very small but some amount of people who work in that industry, that they are being treated very unfairly, very low rates of pay, and not good working conditions, terms and conditions. So a sectoral order in that area, I think, would be a really, really important component. We also need to see how we can ensure that overall this fund is distributed more fairly and integrated across all other sports funding. And I ask you to do this quickly, because by next year, within the budgetary cycle, I don't want to be in front of the PAC asking all these questions again. I'd like to have this sorted out, because it is going to keep coming up, because it is so unique. And furthermore, Minister, I think the time is right now to do it, given the gambling legislation that is also coming into place, because I think there's a lap over between two, so the timing now, I think, is optimal. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy. And now we have the Social Democrats. There's 5 minutes. Are you sharing, or is just Deputy Cairns? You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Sherlock. Greyhound racing is in terminal decline, both here and internationally. It's only legal in a handful of countries, one of them being the US, where it started, and now it's banned in most states there. This is a cruel industry that has no place in modern society. No matter where this industry is, it is plagued with animal welfare concerns. Of course it is, when it's based on the overbreeding of dogs solely for speed. While in jurisdiction after jurisdiction the industry is being banned, the Irish government are continuing to invest millions in it every year. I don't think anyone is surprised by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael's unwavering commitment to this cruel and unpopular industry, but safe to say that people are surprised and disappointed at the Green Party's newfound support of it. The Greens' general election manifesto committed to phasing out of public funding to the greyhound racing industry, the exact thing that the Social Democrats are calling for. It's incredible to me that in 2022, most of our political parties in government and in opposition support this industry. Both Sinn Féin and the Labour Party have motions calling for reviews of this fund, which unfortunately is political speak for kicking the can down the road. You're trying to run with the hare and hunt with the hounds on this one, and it is very obvious to everyone. In essence, this dying industry is being propped up by the government. Greyhound Racing Ireland's own reports are showing significant declines in attendance, while the facts outlined in RTÉ's documentary, Greyhounds Running for Their Lives, remains the definitive record of the appalling standards and cruelty of the industry. Up to 6,000 dogs bred annually to be killed. I have to raise the same questions every year. In whose interest is this? Because it is certainly not in the public interest. Why is 18 million being transferred to the industry? Is it because of their close ties with government parties and others in this House? Organisations such as Irish Guide Dogs for the Blind or Autism Assistance Dogs Ireland only get a tiny fraction of that amount, and this is disgraceful. The funding of over 18.2 million sees an increase of 600,000 from this year. In our alternative budget, the Social Democrats called for state funding for greyhound racing to be phased out over the next 3 years, with an annual reduction of between 6 million and 7 million between now and the end of the 33rd Dáil. We all know that the 18 million could be spent so much better. It's deeply regrettable that the government didn't take our proposal on board in this budget. It's also significant that Dogs Trust has now called for a phased end to greyhound racing in Ireland. That's despite working with the industry for many years to improve conditions for dogs involved. The charity says there are welfare issues that have not been resolved. Greyhound Racing Ireland and its supporters in this House are eager to point out a new system of traceability and welfare inspections, while ignoring the deep irony of their position. These measures are only necessary because the record of the industry is so appalling. Because we know of thousands of dogs that were being bred and then destroyed because they didn't make the cut. Overbreeding in the industry continues to be a major concern. The Agriculture Committee's recent report on dog welfare noted that there is virtually no oversight and transparency concerning canine artificial insemination. The government does not have a list of canine fertility establishments. We have no idea who is involved in this area and if they have any qualifications. This is especially relevant to greyhounds, who are known to be subject to horrific overbreeding. Under official regulations, non-veterinarians can carry out artificial insemination in greyhounds. Greyhound Racing Ireland is responsible for these regulations, and enforcement is carried out by the Irish Coursing Club. Why are these bodies given this power, and where is the oversight of them? This motion, despite all the glaring issues, will comfortably pass. Not only is this wrong, it is completely at odds with public opinion. Most ordinary people are not being represented on this matter. I am calling for an end to public funding of the industry. If it's so important to rural Ireland, if it has such great welfare systems, then let the industry survive on a commercial basis. But you don't want that, and neither do the people in this House, in this government, and on opposition benches, because they all know that the industry would collapse without its annual handout. When will this madness end?
Deputy, and now we have people before profit. So Deputy Murphy, you have 3.5 minutes, and Deputy Barry, you have 1.5 minutes.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
91 million euros provided to subsidise animal cruelty. Incredible. Compared to 15 million euros total core funding for sports organisations in this country, FAI, GAA, Swim Ireland, Olympic Ireland, 91 million euros the government wants to hand over. And the Green Party going against their professed position to support this, and Labour and Sinn Féin shamefully sitting on the fence trying to have it both ways. As has been pointed out, it is wildly out of touch with the views of ordinary people. There was a poll in 2019 that said that 80% of people who had an opinion agreed that the Irish government should stop funding greyhound racing. That poll was done before the discovery of greyhound skeletons this year dumped 2 kilometres from Newbridge Greyhound Stadium, and the recent confirmation that we had in terms of horse racing, that 42 million euros in public funds were paid out in prize money to multi-millionaires at horse races last year. Since, over the last 20 years, we've transferred a reported total of 1.54 billion euros to both industries. What could 91 million euros do? It could double the amount of refuge spaces for those fleeing domestic violence to 282. We would still have money to spare. It's 91 million is more than the total that is being allocated to the retrofitting of local authority social housing in 2023. It's an absolute scandal that the government prioritises funding greyhound and horse racing over any of these vital things. I think there's a lot of attention in this debate every year, rightly, on the issue of greyhound racing. But I think the question of horse racing and where this money is going is increasingly going to come into question as well. Because, and the Minister and I debated this, the truth is this money ends up in the hands of multi-millionaires. You look at the top 3 winners in the most recent fact book from the horse racing industry: JP McManus, Michael O'Leary, John Magnier. People who are all already multimillionaires, they're the ones who are ending up with this money. 72% of the prize money goes to the racehorse owners, only 10% to jockeys and trainers, and only 8% to stable staff, charities and industries organisation. You look at the widespread cruelty in terms of the greyhound industry. You look at the report from 2019, the RT documentary reporting that the industry was breeding up to 1,000% more puppies than it needs, resulting in 6,000 dogs being killed per year, not being deemed fast enough, referred to within the industry as wastage. It is incredible, it's outrageous that year after year this Dáil agrees to give tens, almost 100 million euros to these industries.
So I want to focus in on the proposed funding for the greyhound industry here. The proposal we have before us is 91 million for the Horse and Greyhound Fund, with 18.2 million to go to the greyhound industry. Now, I believe you cannot have a greyhound racing industry without animal cruelty, and there's loads of information to back that up. Speakers have said that there's a minority who are against the industry. It's a lot more than a minority, deputies. There's a very strong opinion in Irish society. And even look at the attendances at the stadia. They're falling very significantly. This money is being used to prop up the industry. If you were to take 18.2 million, what could you spend it on? You could increase funding for combating gender-based violence, shelters, etc. in this country by more than a third. You could hire at a starting salary 466 nurses, and you could have 50 new hospital beds. I think that would be money much better spent. And finally, in relation to the Green Party, from their Animal Welfare Policy 2019, just before the election, the Green Party seeks to cease the use of state funding for greyhound racing and repurpose a portion of this budget allocation towards the welfare and rehoming of greyhounds impacted by such a change. It's amazing the change that can come over the Green Party when they get a few ministerial seats and is it Mercedes or bicycles? But in any case, right? Amazing change there. Green Party deputies will be watching very carefully how they vote on this.
Now we have the regional group, 5 minutes, so it's 2.5 minutes to Deputy Lowry and 2.5 minutes to Deputy Murphy. Thank you.
Horse racing and greyhound racing tradition is ingrained in the Irish psyche. Ireland is recognised across the globe for its exceptional standards in breeding and training racehorses and greyhounds. As an industry, horse racing has generated billions for the Irish economy. My home county of Tipperary is steeped in the tradition of the industry. Horses and everything related to horses is of fundamental importance to our local economy. The core breeding and racing industry in Ireland is estimated to generate an astounding 1.8 billion in gross expenditure annually. The industry directly supports almost 10,000 Irish jobs. Indirectly, it provides employment for thousands more in areas such as equine science, veterinary services, farriers, transportation and stable workers. It also supports jobs for thousands who work whole-time or part-time in areas such as on and off-course betting, those who maintain and service racetracks, catering firms and a myriad of other enterprises allied to the operation of this lucrative industry. Racing tourism alone is a major asset to the Irish economy. The National Stud is a prominent tourist attraction and records a substantial footfall from both overseas and Irish tourists annually, generating vital revenue for transport and local businesses. Race meetings are also major occasions in this country. Thousands of enthusiasts flock from within and outside Ireland to enjoy our renowned events, generating revenue for hospitality and businesses. One of Ireland's greatest claims in international equine circles is that more than 20% of the top 100 flat horses in the world have been bred here in Ireland. Our reputation for breeding has been commended for generations. Coupled with our world-renowned stables, our temperate climate and our calcium-rich soil provide perfect conditions for raising young stock. The 72.8 million allocated to horse racing for the future represents a 3.5% increase. In light of the revenue generated consistently by the horse industry in Ireland through employment, tourism, hospitality, travel and not least by focusing a spotlight on our excellent reputation on the world stage, this allocation pales in comparison to the benefits this sport delivers. I support the greyhound industry. Welfare issues have been addressed, oversight has been strengthened, the industry needs continuing support. I wholeheartedly endorse the allocation.
Thank you, Les Corla. In 2017, the report, it was estimated that over 5,000 jobs are in employment either directly in the greyhound industry or indirectly as a result of the Irish greyhound industry. The greyhound sector is worth over 300 million to the Irish economy, and the funding provided to the Irish greyhound industry comes from a betting tax, which is used to fund both greyhound racing and horse racing. Therefore, the sports are self-financing. With the employment figures I mentioned and the value of the Irish economy, it appears as though the funding is money well spent. In County Wexford, Enniscorthy Greyhound Track is the hub of the sport, with race meetings taking place twice a week to the enjoyment and entertainment of its many supporters and participants. The sport of greyhound racing has received no shortage of criticism from opponents in recent years. There are some in this chamber and beyond who want the sport banned for a variety of reasons. There are, unfortunately, unscrupulous and greedy people in every walk of life and in every industry. The sport of greyhound racing is no exception, but there have been great strides made in recent years to root out those who are involved in the maltreatment of the dogs and to introduce programmes to help rehome and support retired dogs. It's important to note that my general support of the greyhound racing industry will not prevent me from holding officials to account or ensuring that funds made available to the industry are being appropriately spent and managed. As a member of the Public Accounts Committee, I recently had the opportunity to question members of Rassiach Con Héireann about a variety of different issues, and I will continue to do so at every opportunity. To conclude, I believe the vast majority of greyhound owners and trainers are animal lovers and treat their dogs brilliantly. I hope the industry continues to thrive and improve. I will continue to support the Irish greyhound industry, but I will also continue to ensure that there is full transparency and accountability by the way things are being done with the Irish Greyhound Board. And I'd just like to conclude, Minister, I'd echo Deputy Kelly's call for someone to be appointed to the board as the CEO with sectoral experience. I think we need to stabilise the position. There's been far too much turnover, and for the good of the sector, the good of the dogs and the good of everybody involved, I think that's an appropriate measure. Thank you.
Rural Independent Group, Dr. Mattie McGrath, 2 minutes.
I too want to support this debate here today. I support the industry. I have no trust in any of the unscrupulous breeders, a tiny minority that are out there. I want to acknowledge the prowess that we have for the horse racing and the greyhound industry in Tipperary. 10,000 jobs directly in the country and so much more indirectly. And the naysayers here that are just anti-everything really, are anti-this, and you know, they would have us even afraid to speak. I was speaking today, was an issue on leaders' questions, and one of our same heroes here was tweeting within 30 seconds of my speaking that I was dog whistling. Who do you think they are to control this democratically elected Parliament? I, for one, won't be silenced by them in any of my views or opinions, and I thank the last Councillor and Councillor for their protection in that right. But these people talk about polls. Where are these polls done? And they pay students and young people to come along doing picketing and come along doing other issues around the town of Clonmel. We have a stadium, a Greyhound Stadium in Clonmel, wonderful stadium now. We have one in Thurles as well, huge investments in it. Source of entertainment for rural people, and also the industry, the veterinarian, the suppliers, the medicines, everything else, and above all the love that families have in South Tipperary or over Tipperary and the country for their animals and in their horse racing also. As I said, I have no truck for people who neglect or mistreat animals. I support the animal shelters that are out there. They don't get half enough money. But when some deputies here want to come up protesting and they have lurchers and they think it's Greyhound, that'll tell you what they know about the business and what's going on there. So I commend this piece of legislation and support it wholeheartedly.
Thanks very much, Laskin Corley. We are all aware of the enormous contribution that the horse and greyhound industry make to the economy. It is important to ensure that the horse and greyhound racing industries achieve their maximum potential as they contribute to the economic and social development over a wide geographic distribution. The horse and greyhound racing industries make a valuable contribution to a balanced regional economy. In overall terms, it is estimated that the thoroughbred industry has an annual economic impact of $1.84 billion, with direct and indirect employment of 29,000 people. The greyhound sector benefits an estimated 4,000 full-time employees. The thoroughbred industry, in particular, brings a high level of international investment into Ireland. The purpose behind the exchequer funding model for these respective sectors, in addition to supporting these key industries, presents an opportunity to yield a high return investment, leading to a flow of income right through the economy. The Irish equine breeding and racing industry is extremely competitive at a global level and is a real beacon of excellence. We are the third biggest producer of thoroughbred foals in the world. The support provided by public funds through investment in these industries has enabled Ireland to develop a world-class reputation for excellence in horse racing and greyhound racing and breeding. And I would like to, I hear a lot of people objecting, as sometimes you feel it's the same people all the time, but I strongly would suggest to them to go to see where dogs are being, kept and farmed and trained and loved and cared. And I went to see one in Church Cross there in Skibbereen last year, and I just rang him. I said, could I have a look? Called over my own time. So they weren't expecting me to land in the yard. And I had to walk around. My God, you know what? You wouldn't. There's a lot. They're treating their dogs a lot better than the Irish are treating their own humans in the streets. The animals are treated with the utmost of respect. They're walked. They're trained. They're bedded beautifully in warm surrounds. So I think maybe it's very easy to look on the negative side without looking at least at the positives there. And I'll be fully supporting this going forward.
I also support the greyhound and horse industry. From a greyhound family, I grew up with greyhounds. In our house, we had up to 26 greyhounds in our family. And they were better treated than myself, because if they weren't walked and fed, I didn't get fed. That's how much passion my father and family had in the greyhound industry. And it disappoints me to see that the last time the greyhound industry, the people were having a go at them, they said that they brought a greyhound here to the front of the Dáil, and it was a lurcher that they brought to the front of the Dáil. So they didn't even know what a greyhound was, but yet they were against the greyhounds. And also in this House the last time, opposition here, Sinn Féin, voted with the Social Democrats against the greyhound industry in this House. And I hope the next time, when there will be a vote on this, they will actually see what the greyhound and horse industry can provide for this country and for the people and business of this country, and show the well-being that these animals are held in, and how much people love their animals and how much they take care of their animals. So I support the greyhound industry, I support the horse industry, and I think everyone else in this House should support them if they understood what they are, and I do.
The next speaker is not here now, so we'll go back to the Minister.
Yeah, thanks very much, Laskin Corla, and thanks to all of the deputies for the contributions today. It's important that the issue is fully considered and the funding is fully considered, and that there is very strong oversight of it. I think certainly in relation to the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund, that is very much the case. Every year comes before, unlike many other funding streams, it comes before the Oireachtas Committee for a full examination and full discussion, and also it is subject to a full discussion here in the Dáil, and I will shortly be going now to the Seanad in half an hour's time for a full discussion in the Seanad as well. So there is lots of transparency and oversight in relation to the expenditure. I know there's different views among many in the Chamber in relation to it, and it's absolutely fair that people would have different views, but certainly the government is very clear and strong that the funding is something that should be in place and that is really important for both sectors, and indeed the horse and greyhound racing sector Both of them have developed over the years by virtue of the strong government policy that's been in place and indeed the very strong funding that's in place. I note Deputy Carthy in his contribution outlined that Sinn Féin do support horse and greyhound funding and was very clear and very strong on that. I'll be going to the Shannon now, where I've no doubt Senator Boylan will be a lot less clear and a lot less strong on it, and will be giving the impression that she's very much against the funding. I don't know from your contribution whether you'll actually be voting for the fund this year or not. I know you have an amendment. I know you have an amendment which I'm very clear we will be opposing, which will be opposing. I'm presuming that you will probably, like you did last year, vote against the funding. So despite saying that you'll be in favour of it, you'll be against it. So you have a very confused position on it. I'm sure while you call for lots, while you can call for transparency in relation to how the funding is dealt with, the fact that it comes before the Dáil and Shannon every year puts you in an awful bind, because you don't know where you're coming or going. You're trying to ride two horses in the one time, or as Deputy Cairns said, run with the hare and hunt with the hound. And that's a difficult thing to do, and it exposes you in terms of not having a position on it. I certainly think in terms of the horse racing and greyhound sector, for whom this funding is massively important, if they're depending on Sinn Féin to continue to fund the sector, then they'll be very concerned. They'll be very concerned. They'll be very concerned. They'll be very concerned indeed.
Has been dedicated to Sinn Féin.
Particularly whenever,
why are you rejecting the amendment?
Particularly when a lot of the left-leaning politicians who you want to go into government with and who you were seeking to go into government with last time are so adamant that it should be opposed and should be done away with. So if they're depending on you, Deputy Carthy, and Sinn Féin to actually keep the sectors alive, I think they'd be very concerned indeed. In relation to, and listen, the other thing, the 80-20, so listen, it's fair to have different views on that. Last year you called for a review, you called for the 80-20. Listen, you're a member of the Parliament, you're a member of the Legislature. There's not, you can make law, you can propose law. You haven't come forward with any proposal to change the 80-20. You haven't. No, you can bring forward a bill. You have done nothing since last year. You'll do nothing again. Once this is dealt with now this year, there won't be a word out of you.
That's actually not true, and that's disingenuous. You're misleading the House. I deal with this at the Public Accounts Committee and the Agriculture Committee on an ongoing basis, and you know that. And you know that. You spent your entire speech talking about Sinn Féin.
It's open to you to bring legislation and propose that. And listen, in relation to the horse racing and the greyhound fund, so that has increased by about 3% this year. Most of the other state agencies have been increased by about 3% as well. So it's not different really from the approach that's been taken to most state agencies. So, I'm saying both have been increased by about 3%. And as I said at the committee, that level of certainty in relation to recurrent funding is important. There's then strategic plans and assessment by both HRI and RC each year in terms of how that funding is spent, with key stakeholders represented in both those boards. Listen, I want to acknowledge as well in relation to Deputy Kelly's contribution. He's been a consistent supporter of funding. He again makes the case in relation to the 80-20 and whether that's an appropriate way to do it. It's a fair view to have. It's something that again, anybody can come forward with legislation on. From my point of view, I think that level of consistency is something which is actually constructive as well. So, but you're entitled to a different view, but act on it. If you have a view on it, do something. You're a member. No. You have an amendment today in relation to a review. You're then going to vote against the funding despite expressing support for the sector. It's simply a ruse to try and cover your embarrassment in the fact, due to the fact that you don't have a position. And while you're out speaking to the Horse and Greyhound Fund,
your entire speech talking about opposition without actually referring to the amendment that the opposition put forward.
As well. While you're out saying how you support the sector, meanwhile, Senator Boylan will be firing off emails to all the NGOs out there that are in contact with her saying how she's against it and how she's opposing it. So God help you if you ever get into government in relation to what you do.
Thank you, Minister.
So again, I recognise the points Deputy Kelly made, and recognise as well the view and perspective of the Social Democrats. And the one point I'll ask you here, look, in relation to the point Deputy Murphy made in relation to the funding for the sector, which of course ignores the jobs that are dependent on it. But in relation to sports funding, we did this year invest €150 million in sports clubs across the country, which is really, really important and shows the government commitment to sports in general as well.
Thank you. No. Sorry. Sorry. The debate has concluded. No, no,
Respect the chair,
no,
Monica,
no,
say yourself.
no, please, just, no, Deputy, no, honestly, I'm not, I can be flexible. No, no, Deputy, no, please. Deputy, the Minister has concluded, the debate has concluded. Deputy, thank you. Garmagif, so I'm moving on now, the debate has concluded. We're a little over time, and there's an amendment to be put to the floor. I see on Keshna Gonentho for on Lasso. The question is that the amendment be made. That's the Sinn Féin amendment. Is that agreed? Agreed. Not agreed. Okay, it's not agreed. So na chakti athar heave na keshta abrigito. The chakti athar na gwena abriginil. Is though he will on kesht culture. Vote also. Thank you. The division has been demanded, and that will. Where is it going to? It's going to the voting. The weekly session. It's deferred until the weekly session, which is tonight, I think, is it? Yeah. Garmagif. In the name of Sinn Féin Deputy Matt Carthy, to the motion read proposed approval by Dail Eireann of the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund Regulations 22. Today, on the question that the amendment be made, a division was claimed, and that division must be taken now. The clerk will now ring the bells. Motion reapproval of the Horse and Greyhound Racing Fund Regulations. Amendment number 2 by Sinn Féin. Tellers, Thaw, Pádraig McLaughlin, agus Jack Chambers, Neil, Nachachty, Denise Mitchell, agus Brendan Griffin. For reading out something and not checking it, so I'll go back again. Tá Pádraig McLaughlin, agus Denise Mitchell, Neil, Jack Chambers, agus Brendan Griffin. I read across instead of down. Gurmagh. Result, Tá, Dahid, yes 40, Neil 86, no 86. Sheelum go will butcher an gest. Anish see an gest. The amendment by the Labour Party, amendment number 1, is that being pressed? Okay, so amendment number 1 is being pressed. And will Shishin Enthia? Neil. So na Chakti atá hív na kesta abrigi tá. Na Chakti tá na gwina abrigi Neil. Is dócha go will butcher an gest. Vote. Amendment number 1 by the Labour Party. Tellers Thaw, Alan Kelly, agus Duncan Smith, Neil, Jack Chambers agus Brendan Griffin. Third result, Thaw Truckany, yes 39, Neil 88, no 88, Tá Búcha an Gest. So see an Keshnal go nen titar an Tarishkin that the motion be agreed to. Is that agreed? Not agreed. The Chakti Tha son na Keshta Abrigi Tha. The Chakti Tha na Gwina Abrigi Neil. Is Thoha go will an Kesht Richa. Both. McConalogue al Moshe the Hella. Horse and Greyhound Fund Regulations 2022. Tellers, Thaw, Jack Chambers, agus Brendan Griffin, Neil, Holly Cairns, agus Paul Murphy. Third result, Thaw Octado, yes 82, Neil Dahat the Cahar, no 44, Sheelam Gowill and Kesh Richa, agus Thaw on the Dail Eireann Loguji, Sheno Mukonani Amor, Dermag.